Hi, love. How are you doing? Good morning, first of all. Today is Labor Day, and it is the 6th of September. And I just want to say good morning. It's 10 o'clock. I just got finished having breakfast. I hope your morning has been going well. Uh, I thought that I would try something new today. And I know that you enjoy literature and reading, and I enjoy the same thing. And I figured that I would share one of my passions with you, and that is reading psychology and self help books. I came across this interesting passage in a book I was reading, and I thought of you, and it was something I wanted to share. So here we go. Now, this is kind of a long video, so you don't necessarily have to watch it all the way through. But if you were interested in what I've been thinking about lately, I just wanted to share. So here's a new idea. So let's turn the camera around. Oh, alrighty. So this is a book I've been reading lately. It's called Overcoming Unwanted Intrusive Thoughts, a CBT Guide to Getting Over Frightening, Obsessive, and Disturbing Thoughts. Now, everybody has unwanted intrusive thoughts every once in a while, and this is a very specialized book, really. But it started to treat a subject, the subject of anxiety, and I didn't necessarily think the book would go there, but it is, and I really loved its treatment of the subject, and I wanted to share it with you. Now, Emily, you may know that I had anxiety for 17 years, and so perhaps maybe some of these lessons learned can help you. So I figured I'd just read along with the book, and just share you my impressions of it. So I'm going to go full screen, and here we are. Changing your brain: how extinction works. There are two ways to explain how your brain learns to become less fearful as a result of exposure. One is called emotional processing, and the other is called inhibitory learning. Both theories are supported by brain research, so we are going to give you a short explanation of both. And let me pause right there. I love how this book talks about CBT acknowledging that exposure therapy is basically the end all be all for removing anxiety and treating anxiety. I think that's true. From what I've read, exposure therapy is the way to go, and I love how this book explains it. So let's move on to the next subject, to the next part. So it says, emotional processing explained. Emotional processing theory states that your brain develops false, fearful memory structures that keep your fears alive. When you consistently avoid or run away from thoughts that trigger these memory structures, you never learn that they are incorrect and that your thought isn't really dangerous. As a result of keeping away from the triggers, they remain part of your brain for very long periods of time. You don't have the chance to habituate or get used to the thought because your false brain structure tells you they are dangerous and you should keep away. Oh boy, I totally love this paragraph. Because we are so good at avoiding our thoughts and situations that give us stress. And remember, this is about emotional processing. And I love how it talks about how in order for a brain to habituate a fear, you have to sort of remain in the fear. You sort of have to be exposed to that fear so that your brain can manage it, can manage that fear however it does, manage, I guess, the memory structures, it says. And I love how it says that because we avoid our triggers, they remain part of our brain for very long periods of time. And you don't have a chance to habituate or get used to the thought. I think that's totally true. I'll continue. This theory explains why actively inviting the thoughts, along with anxiety, creates corrective emotional processing. So fearful memory structures in your brain become accurate. Oh, I really love that. Real experience allows false fear memories to be emotionally processed, and your fear will then be erased. But there are two important requirements. The first is that corrective emotional processing only occurs in the presence of fear, since the fear is what allows the memory structures in the brain to change. The technical term is exposure plus activation. Any exposure that activates anxiety brings the false fear structures into play, and they change as a result of seeing that nothing dangerous, as opposed to frightening, really happens. I really love this idea because, particularly the idea it says any exposure that activates anxiety brings the false fear structures into play, and they change as a result of seeing that nothing dangerous, as opposed to frightening, really happens. So basically, that is referring to surprise. We've got this idea where basically we think that something is going to be fearful, and then we're in the middle of it, and then we're surprised that it's not fearful anymore, and then what we do is our memory structures change. Our brain sort of processes how we view that situation, and so it's just like there's like a realization that happens when we're exposed to our fears, and we find that there's nothing dangerous that really happens. I love that. I'll continue reading. The second requirement is that you keep in contact with your triggering thoughts until your anxiety goes away, or at least calms down considerably. This allows your brain to get used to the thought and habituate to it. You get maximum therapeutic benefits from exposures that are long enough for this to happen. Okay, I'm going to speak for a second here. I really love this. I can imagine someone who's afraid of elevators sort of hops in an elevator and then hops back out. And they don't allow themselves to habituate to the elevator. I think it's so exciting to know that if you stay in whatever environment makes you anxious, that eventually you'll habituate to it. Anyway, I think that's an important learning. I'll move on. Emotional processing theory makes it very clear why avoiding the thought won't work. Avoidance keeps you experiencing the thought as dangerous or intolerable, and that sets the stage to re-trigger your amygdala. Worry voice plays the part of the false but powerful fear structures in your brain, but the voice of false comfort is the voice that represents avoidance and distraction. Both of those interfere with emotional processing. Okay, that last sentence or two, you may not be familiar with it. That's okay. I think just delete that. I just really like the first sentence of that last paragraph. Emotional processing theory makes it very clear why avoiding the thought won't work. Avoidance keeps you experiencing the thought as dangerous or intolerable, and that sets the stage to re-trigger that part of your brain which creates stress responses, the amygdala. All right, let's move down to the next section. Inhibitory learning explained. Oh, I really love this paragraph too. It says, another more recent model explains the therapeutic benefits of exposure in a slightly different way. The inhibitory learning model of exposure says that people don't really unlearn fearful responses. Instead, what happens is that new pathways are created in the brain that compete with the old fearful response. The more new pathways that are created, the greater the chance that a non-fearful path will be chosen. If you practice it enough, you create many non-fearful responses that inhibit the scary one. A non-fearful response that becomes the default response, and you are no longer afraid. Oh wow, I love this. So let me just say a few things about it. It's sort of like they mentioned, like on a map from point A to point B. our brains have pathways, neural pathways that are well worn, say from point A to point B. But you can create new pathways. You can decide to handle a situation in a different way, and that, if that becomes the freeway, that becomes the superhighway, then the old response is not used as much. Now, it might show up on occasion, but most of the time the new pathway gets used if that new pathway is practiced a lot. So let me move on. Imagine that your fearful response is the main road going through your town, and imagine that a planned highway is the new reaction. If a highway is built right next to the road, the highway will become used more and more until the road is barely used. The road still exists, but it handles less and less traffic as people get used to the convenience of the highway. Exposure work creates the new highway. Anyway, I guess that's really all I wanted to mention. I love this let's check out this last paragraph at the very bottom of the page. It says, what is most important about exposure is that you stay in contact with what frightens you until the feelings seem more manageable. They don't have to go away, but you should stay long enough so they seem a little more tolerable. You might say, well. Anyway, I guess that's the whole thing, the point that I wanted to get across. So, love, there you have it. I've been reading this excellent book about unwanted intrusive thoughts, but it had this great section, actually 2 sections, about managing anxiety, and I thought they were great lessons. And I think when I was experiencing anxiety, I didn't quite know this information that how important it was to sort of expose yourself to anxiety, and but now I know that it's huge, really, and so nowadays I do my best to avoid avoiding. Anyway, I hope you gained something from this review of some literature, and I'll talk to you later. I hope you have a wonderful Labor Day weekend. Bye-bye, sweetheart. I love you.